traversing the snow and the roads to get here. I'm Danice Jones-Dorsey, and I will be your Mistress of Ceremonies for this meeting. I would now like to invite Jamie Lee, University of Baltimore School of Law Community Development Clinic, Barbara Besdick, University of Maryland School of Law Community Development Clinic, and Lane Victorson, University of Maryland School of Social Work Community Outreach Services, to come forward and to welcome you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is a very exciting turnout. It's great to see many familiar faces and many not so familiar faces. This is really terrific. So I'm Barbara Besdick, not Jamie Lee. I'm at the University of Maryland School of Law. I want to say that I and some of my students at the Community Economic Development Clinic have been involved from early days trying to think about, with members of the Roundtable, what would it mean legally to bring community land trusts to the state of Maryland. And so our principal contribution to this event has been a bunch of background research. We have met some wonderful people who have made the important decision to go ahead and form a community land trust here in Baltimore, and we are very pleased to have the honor to work with them in a lawyer-client relationship. And I'm also pleased to say that we are continuing to work to do some of the nitty-gritty legal stuff that no one here really wants to talk about, but be aware that in fact it is happening. So we are preparing the legal documents that need to structure the actual community land trust relationship between homeowners and the community holding and serving nonprofit that brings that entity together. The point of all this work for me as a professor is to be able to bring legal skills and engage law students into doing real good work, not real estate for the folks where the structure is already established, but to make affordable housing principles and reality work for people who need truly, deeply, durably affordable housing in Baltimore. It's been my great privilege to work with the Housing Roundtable and to have a tiny bit to do in making this wonderful launch happen. So thank you all for coming.
Hi, I'm Jamie Lee. I teach at the University of Baltimore School of Law, and I'm both proud and humbled to be here as a supporter of this project. I'm really proud of my law students who have been working on this project and supporting through research and writing. I'm very grateful to the University of Baltimore Foundation, which actually provided some of the funds to help publish this report. I'm grateful to see Vicki Schultz, our Associate Dean from the Law School, here in attendance. Thank you for coming. And, just speaking as a lawyer, we know the technicalities and the dry stuff. We can help with that as lawyers, but in order to understand what the meaning of justice is, we really need to look to you all and to our communities. And so my final thanks is to everybody here in this room for your passion and your leadership to make Baltimore a better place.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lane Victorson. I'm with the Social Work Community Outreach Services here at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. I just want to say real quickly, the School of Social Work does have a macro concentration, and so we do train social workers to be community developers, community organizers, and working in social action. We've been placing students with United Workers, and I've been working on this issue for a long time, and I'm part of the Housing Roundtable, and I'm just really happy that we can be here and use our students to help facilitate this kind of social technology that really is needed, I think, in this city, and it's a great opportunity. I would just say, since I can see there are some seats in here. I know it's kind of hard, but you can wedge in. We do have an overflow room in 2E10 that's streaming right now, if you all want to use that as an option.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask Peter Sabonis to join me here at the podium. He is with the National Economic and Social Rights Initiative. Peter.
I'm here to present the findings of this report, which are simple and can be said in one sentence. Development can occur in Baltimore City without involuntary displacement. That's what this report's about. But we have to be intentional about this with public policy by recognizing the speculative forces that are always present in development, by understanding how jobs, incomes, and housing costs are inextricably intertwined, and by demanding a commitment to public funds and a public infrastructure, one that's interfused with community, with land, and with trust, that focuses on public investment that creates jobs and ensure housing affordability forever and strengthens neighborhoods. In our report, we show the result of public policies that have accommodated private interests and racism to enable private profit. We note policies that enabled white flight, housing capital flight to the suburbs, factory flight, manufacturing capital flight to sweatshop labor. And even though we have admirably retooled our economy to a service economy, to a hospitality-centered economy, we've been subservient, nevertheless, to trickle down, a preference, a priority for meeting the needs of private interests. That economy is impacted by structural racism. Instead of leading with our community interests, our community values, and our public values, we show the results of this in our report. Our tourism economy basically produces jobs that earn, if you work 40 hours a week on average, $26,936 a year. That's if you get 40 hours a week. But it's difficult in these seasonal tourist-based jobs to get 40 hours a week. It's difficult to get raises. It's difficult to get time off for your family. Structural racism has produced, as we know, criminalized communities. We note the fact that since 1986, our police department budget has increased by 243%, which dwarfs, totally eclipses any increase in our budgets for Parks and Rec, for Office of Employment Development, and for health. And it's also produced a wide band of citizens, primarily black, primarily male, who are marked with the scarlet letter of criminal records when they go and seek an employment. In last year, in 2014, 54,863 folks passed through the circuit court and the district court. That structural inequality has also produced public housing destruction and privatization, a marked decrease in CDBG and home monies, which are used for community development, and programs like the low-income housing tax credit, which actually focuses more on the needs of investors than it does on our real need for housing at 30% area median income, which is about that $26,000 annual level. We have an opportunity presented in this report that interfuses public policy with community land and trust and recognizes that whatever we do in development, that housing costs will rise, and they're likely to rise beyond the rise in the incomes of our residents. The recommendations of the report will be presented by Denise.
Your presence indicates your concern and care. Your presence indicates that you're interested in a very thoughtful report and review, but your presence also indicates your desire for responsible action. We're calling for a commitment of $20 million public bonds annually invested in nonprofit and community land trust housing via an Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and $20 million of public bonds annually to deconstruct vacants, hire returning citizens, and create green space and opportunities for urban agriculture. We are calling for to establish a land bank already authorized by city charter to facilitate the disposition of vacant properties or empower Vacants to Values program to facilitate property acquisition for CLT or Community Land Trust development. We are calling for strengthen and enforce local hiring provisions. City residents are trained, priority given to returning citizens from incarceration for employment in deconstruction and the rehabbing of that same vacant property. Finally, we are calling for a support for municipal and financial experts to work with community leaders and other stakeholders on implementing community master plans, providing technical support, ensuring participation by diverse groups of those most impacted by the development decisions. I would now like to invite Mr. James Alston, Westport Community and Economic Development Corporation, to come forward.
And James will. He will come forward because I will set the stage for James by simply talking about the history of, briefly, our history of separate and unequal development, basically. Segregation through city ordinances, as we know, through racially restrictive covenants, through block busting, through redlining, and putting two maps up on the wall right now, which the one on the right is a redlining map from 1937 where bankers and the federal government got together and they classified every neighborhood in the city based on age, condition of housing, race, ethnicity, class, religion, economic status of residents. It was designed to help the feds and banks avoid risk, avoid getting into trouble with their speculation. These were areas where banks either stopped issuing mortgages or if they did, charged exorbitant fees or interest rates. This speculation map actually then got rather large and it expanded to the suburbs, quite frankly, and with federal money, federal mortgage guarantees, federal highway funds, built the suburban expansion around Baltimore City, which was primarily white. The retail sector moved out of Baltimore City. In 1950, we had 80% of retail activity in the region was in Baltimore City. And by 1992, it was 18%. This, as you know, was accompanied by industrial flood, factory flood. Federal tax policy primarily helped with mergers. It helped with relocations. It made it more profitable. And certainly, corporations are always looking for cheaper labor. The market typology map is on your left. That's the map from 2014, which actually is very similar to the redlining map in that it uses housing data. It does not use race and ethnicity. But yet it uses median sales price, owner occupancy, vacant housing rates to classify neighborhoods. You can find this map on the city planning website. Just type in market typology 2014. It's revised every year. We marked in red those neighborhoods on those maps that have the 3 highest stress levels. Those are not neighborhoods that get Vacants to Value, streamlined code enforcement, and expedited receivership for vacant properties, even though they have the highest number of vacant properties. Why not? It's because there's no market there. There's no ability to make a profit there. So city services does not target those areas. In fact, it ignores those areas. And on page 11, we have a quote from Alan Malik, who says who warns that market typology should not be a neighborhood triage map, making decisions that certain neighborhoods are less worthy of attention than others. There are people in those neighborhoods, there are folks in those neighborhoods who actually have organize community land trusts and will organize them and deserve investment. Jobs, jobs, jobs is what we hear when we talk housing oftentimes. What we really need, we need jobs. That'll take care of the housing problem. They're intertwined. And it's not just jobs, it's incomes. Because the fact of the matter is, we have low-wage jobs. And the incomes they produce, as we know, are roughly $26,000 in the hospitality section. But we also have a number of people who don't work or who have serious employment obstacles. And this slide shows those folks who have criminal records. We'll just take the number that passed through the criminal justice system in Baltimore City last year alone. That's the 54,863. Add them to the folks who are disabled on temporary disability assistance, the folks who are disabled on SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and the folks who are disabled on SSI, Supplemental Security Income. And you see that you have a large group of people who are probably not going to benefit from employment in primarily single households. The last thing to remember is these folks were once served, albeit badly, by federal low-income housing programs, which have been cut. And you can see the details of those on page 17. Last but not least, as I said earlier, whatever you do with development will increase land value if you're successful, and will increase housing costs if you're successful. And this slide indicates how many people in Baltimore City, renters and owners, who pay more than 30% of their income on housing, and in addition, pay more than 50% of their income on housing. I'll turn it over to James, who can tell you about his experience in Westport.
Thank you, Peter, for that excellent description of the big picture of how Baltimore has approached economic and community development. I am now going to share with you what it's like at the neighborhood level and a community surrounded by these big development projects. My name is James Alston. I am a resident of the Westport community. My family has lived in the area since 1851. Some of my relatives are buried in Westport's Mount Auburn Cemetery, one of the few cemeteries where African Americans were permitted to be buried. I am a member of the Westport Community Economic Development Corporation. So my role here today is to describe the black plight of Westport residents and so many other poor black and brown people throughout Baltimore City. And hopefully I'll be able to provide a spark that produces change. Westport sits at the southernmost gateway of Baltimore City, surrounded by major interstates like 295 and 95. It has access to the last undeveloped waterfront in Baltimore City, the western portion of the Middle Branch, extension of the Patapsco River. Westport was once one of the major focal points of the since dissipated and significant industrial industries in Baltimore, such as BGE, we all know of them, and Carl Lohr Glass Company. And it was a source of livelihood and income for a lot of folks, specifically a lot of folks in my community. In the early to mid-1900s, Westport was home to two Negro League baseball organizations, the Baltimore Black Sox and the Baltimore Elite Giants. So how has Baltimore treated our community over the last 50 years? Here are some neighborhood stats. The distress zone. According to a 2008 report produced by the Baltimore City Health Department and the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Summer Scholars Program, 64% of Westport residents were African American, a change that reflects the Great White Flight. 52% of the population was aged 18 to 64, 40% of the population was age 0 to 24, and there are more babies coming, of course, right? 43% of the population earned less than $25K, 30% of the area median income. 20% of all deaths were due to the drug overdose or homicide. Baltimore Neighborhood Indicator Alliance report of 2013 shows that 55% of households are hit by the cradle of the human race, women. In over a decade, speculative housing has only produced high rents despite being surrounded by several large developments such as M&T Stadium, Oriole Ball Park, Harbor Hospital, Bresco Incinerator. None has significantly been a source of significant income and or livable wages for Westport residents at large. Disinvestment from public and by public and private sector has reduced the economically and socially failing community. In more concrete terms, obstacles that stand in the way of measurable positive quality of life for most poor black folks include the burden of housing costs, BG&E bills, telephone bills, property taxes, food, gas, transportation, clothing, rent, cost of home maintenance, water bills, etc. Because income levels have not risen with the rate of inflation, folk often experience real struggles and are faced with making hard decisions between eating, keeping a roof over their heads, and caring for our children. They are the most crucial component of our society, and how we create a landscape for their future pushes me to keep doing the work of producing a more caring and equitable environment and opportunity for them to live their best lives. Sometimes, I work 9 to 5, I come home from work, and my pattern is to always go home and take a nap. I need my naps. So one day there was this commotion out front, and I go to discover there's a lot of kids out front just frolicking, not doing anything, really bad, but it disturbed my nap. So I go to the door to approach them, and I had this sobering moment. What do I say to them? They have nothing to do. They have no opportunities. And for me, that pushed me even more to try to do something for them, to create a better future for them, because they are our next generation. So without investment in care in vulnerable communities, we will go on in a state of chaos, supporting unjust manufactured systems that criminalize and stifle our most vulnerable population, experience alarming unemployment rates, lack of security of property, and mental health disparities that manifest in unwanted ways. We see that with the uprising, right? Surrounding Freddie Gray. Over the past years, the Housing Roundtable, United Workers, and members from the community at large have spent a lot of time researching the problems that plague our cities and finding one or some of the many ways to address them. Father Ty will now get us to our main focus today, some tools for community and economic development that restore trust, create jobs, and strengthen neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Again, good morning. I'm Father Ty Hollinger. I'm pastor of 3 parishes here in the city, up in the northeast, in Frankfort, Gardnerville, Parkside, Hamilton, Morville, St. Dominic, St. Anthony, Most Precious Blood. I'm also a board member of an emerging CLT, Community Land Trust, in Northeast, the Northeast Housing Initiative. And we've just heard from James and Peter and others how the history of failed development of Baltimore has impacted neighborhoods, every neighborhood across our city in some way. And the struggle to find housing with dignity is an all too real struggle shared by many, if not most, families that live in this city. I have personally seen the pain of people who have lost their homes to foreclosure, people who have lost their home or their apartment from evictions. I've heard too many stories of people who are suffering or have suffered homelessness, and I've had to say goodbye to too many families who have been displaced from their homes and often displaced from the neighborhoods that they're part of or even this city. We know that this failed development crisis in permanently affordable housing in Baltimore is persistent. But we are here today because we also believe it is completely preventable. Many people have come together across Baltimore to create the Baltimore Housing Roundtable because we've seen how our communities can come together, as James said, to look, study, learn, and now begin to develop plans for fair development, for a development that honors a vision of housing that is affordable for all people, but especially to the families and persons who are most in need of housing with dignity. Our communities have learned about a creative solution to housing affordability that is being successfully and viably used in over 200 places around our country today. It is the Community Land Trust. Not that old of an idea, but also not that radical. But then again, in some ways it is. When I think of what a Community Land Trust is, and how it's such a wonderful, unique solution to these kinds of persistent problems in just, equitable, fair housing, I'm reminded of a quote from a prophet. You know, you bring a priest here, I gotta quote a prophet. His name is Aldo Leopold. Some of you may know him. He wrote a book called the Sand County Almanac back in 1949. In there, at one place he says, "We abuse the land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." The title of our report that we've issued out to this community is the Community Land Trust. Those three words held together on that cover signify what those three words, when they're actual visionary principles put into action, how they can transform a city. We abuse our land because we do treat it mostly as a commodity, as something to be bought and sold, something to make a profit off of, and sometimes those profits have been obscene. The CLT helps communities see land as a common good, a resource that can be held in trust by a community itself, so that development on that land can serve the common needs of all people. The CLT is a fair development method that begins to help us see land and homes on the land as a community to which we should feel that we belong. The CLT really does help us bring love and respect into the development process, because the CLT helps us find a way to bring real trust back into our neighborhoods and, frankly, to our city. The structure and governance of the CLT is ruthlessly democratic, and it's grassroots, and I think that's where the trust begins, and this trust and love is nurtured. It's difficult, but it is very viable and very possible. Here to give us more information about what a CLT is and how it's worked to help transform a city not unlike our own, it gives me a great honor and a privilege to introduce now to you Harry Smith. Harry is the Director of Sustainable Economic Development of the Dudley Neighbors Inc., and also the Director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, a CLT that has been in existence for many years now in the Dudley Street neighborhood of Boston. So Harry, thank you for being here today to share with us.
Great. Thank you very much. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks to Father Ty and all the organizers from Baltimore Housing Roundtable for organizing this great event, and congratulations on the issuing of the report and all the great work that you're doing. I didn't want to start with a weather joke, but I have to say, I know Baltimore is known for its hospitality, but you really didn't have to go to all the trouble of bringing 2 feet of snow for me. So welcome. We have very little snow in Boston right now, so it's a big shock. So I'm really pleased to be here, especially I grew up in Maryland. I have a lot of family from Baltimore. My 2 sisters are proud graduates of Towson University. And so I've been following very closely a lot of the great organizing and community development work that has been happening in Baltimore, as well as the challenges and major issues that are facing the city. I'll say that as hard as it is to talk in front of